You're about to witness how an ordinary man, no power, no connections, armed with nothing but patience, intelligence, and a promise made to his late father, managed to cut the power to a 4 million mansion in broad daylight, and made an entire neighborhood rise and applaud in silence. This isn't a movie. This isn't a novel. This is a true story. The story of Art, a quiet man living peacefully on the ranch his father left him. A man who simply wanted to repair an old, weather-worn section of fence. But that simple act lit the match that would spark a relentless war between Art and HOA Karen, the iron-fisted queen of a luxury neighborhood. Police were called over a 3-foot hole, warnings issued for a fence post that hadn't yet been set in concrete, equipment confiscated, neighbors turned cold, and worst of all, the oak tree planted by Art's mother, the last living symbol of family, was cut down in the dead of night, like a silent declaration of war. But Art didn't run. Inside him lived memory. His father's teachings, a belief in justice, not through violence but through the law. And then deep inside a dusty trunk, he found an old folder, a 2014 utility agreement. And with that discovery, Art held in his hands a bomb. Not the kind that explodes with noise, but the kind that ends everything with one click. This is the story of the most legally savage revenge you'll ever hear. And if you've ever been bullied by a neighbor, harassed by a power-hungry HOA, or just want to see justice done by the book, then don't go anywhere. You'll want to see how this ends. It was Saturday morning, and the sun hadn't yet risen over the distant pine trees, when Art arrived at the piece of land his father had left him. The trees rustled softly, and dew still clung to the grass. He poured more hot coffee into his old ceramic mug and stepped out into the backyard. The plan for the day was simple: replace the rotting section of fence that had been leaning for almost a year. The first post needed to go in, and he had nearly finished digging the 3-foot hole. Everything was peaceful until she appeared. Karen, 52 years old, wearing a deep purple silk nightgown, LV for slippers, and a stare sharp enough to crush any sign of defiance. Stop that illegal digging immediately. Her voice rang out like a siren. Art looked up, set the shovel down, wiped his sweat, and gave a polite nod. Good morning, Karen. I'm just repairing my own fence. You're in violation of HOA Clause 4.2b regarding community aesthetics, she practically screamed. I'm the president of this HOA, and I won't let you destroy the image of this neighborhood over a few pieces of rotten wood. Art pulled out his phone and opened the county-issued land map. Karen, here's the boundary marker. I'm digging more than 15 feet inside my property line. I've got a permit for the repairs. But to Karen, permits meant nothing if they didn't come with her personal approval. Any construction visible from my windows must be pre-approved, she said, pointing toward her palace-like mansion, where sunlight gleamed off marble pillars and the infinity pool sparkled in the background. Art shrugged. He knew he was within the law, but he also knew that for people like Karen he only made them angrier. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. My neighbor is operating heavy machinery and threatening me. I feel unsafe. Please send officers immediately. Art stood still. The peaceful morning had just been torn apart. 20 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up. Sergeant Martinez stepped out, his face a mix of exhaustion and familiarity. Morning, Art. I heard there was some kind of disturbance. Art handed over his paperwork, the land map, and the permit for the fence repair. The officer inspected everything thoroughly, walked the fence line, and nodded. Mrs. Karen, he said, turning to her, everything is in order. He's not violating any laws. But Karen didn't back down. He threatened me. I feel attacked. Martinez looked at Art, then back at her, and sighed. This isn't my first HOA incident, but by county procedure, since there's been an official complaint, I'm required to temporarily confiscate the equipment for 48 hours. Karen stood behind him, beaming with triumph. The officer took the keys to Art's excavator. Art received a formal warning. The paper clearly stated, temporary suspension of construction due to neighbor complaint. In that moment, under the sunlight and silence of a wealthy suburban street, Art didn't get angry. He simply looked at Karen, and nodded slowly, not in agreement, but as a mark. You'll remember my face, Karen. And she smiled, unaware that smile would mark the beginning of the darkest days of her life. Some people back down when threatened. Others take a quiet step back, not out of fear, but to gain momentum. When Karen thought she had won, that a single phone call could break Art's will, she had no idea that the counterstrike had already begun, and it was coming from someone she never expected: an elderly neighbor, and a tiny USB drive. That afternoon, Art sat quietly in his small kitchen. In front of him lay the official warning, a temporary stop work order for 48 hours. Every second that passed felt like Karen was tightening her grip on his freedom, right on the land his father had left him. The old words rang again in his head. Justice doesn't come with fists. It comes with patience. And just then, there was a knock on the door. It was Mrs. Linda, the neighbor 2 houses down. A petite Vietnamese woman, snow-white hair, always with a gentle smile on her afternoon walks. But today, that smile was gone. "Art," she said softly, her voice light as the breeze. "I recorded everything this morning. From my kitchen. Through the window." She lied. "I think you'll need this." She handed him a small USB stick. Art almost couldn't believe it. He plugged it into his laptop. The screen lit up, clear video and audio, capturing the entire confrontation, Karen crossing the property line, confronting him, threatening him, and then calling the police in a perfectly rehearsed, trembling voice. No signs of aggression from Art, no yelling, no hostility. Just Karen performing. "She lied," Linda repeated, her eyes calm but resolute. "And I can't let her do this to someone decent like you." Art almost teared up, not because of the video, but because of the kindness, the quiet courage of a neighbor who seemed so small, yet had just given him the greatest weapon he could ask for. 2 hours later, Art was sitting in Police Chief Martinez's office. He handed over the USB, his repair permit, the land survey, and a thick folder of documentation. Martinez said nothing at first. He watched the video twice. The second time he leaned back in his chair, rubbed his temples. "I hate these HOA messes," he muttered. "Wretch folks twisting the rules, using the law like a bludgeon. Spinning drama like it's a soap opera. But procedures are procedures," he continued. "I can't just void the warning on the spot. It has to go to the county for review and approval." He paused, looked Art in the eye. "But I'll tell you this video changes everything." On the drive home, Art didn't say a word, but his eyes, they burned with fire. Because now he knew Karen hadn't just lied, she had handed him the perfect case for a countersuit. The death blow, she thought she had landed. It was just the match. And that little USB stick, that was the fuse. That night, Art went online and ordered a brand new security camera system. Not just any system. No, these were covert cameras. Night vision, infrared hidden inside trees, fence posts, even bird feeders. No one would know where they were. But they would see everything. If Karen wanted to play dirty, he would play clean. With evidence. There are battles that aren't fought with fists, but with quiet moves made in the shadows. And in this chapter, you'll witness just how far one man can be pushed before he turns. And you'll understand why not everyone dares to cross a man named Art. The first night after meeting with Chief Martinez, Art couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of something else, a quiet intuition, a gut feeling that Karen wasn't finished, and he was right. At exactly 20:30 a.m., the roar of a diesel engine shattered the silence outside. Art jumped from bed and sprinted to the front door, but he was already too late. A truck with no license plates had just pulled away down the dirt road, leaving behind a heap of construction trash. Broken concrete, rusted steel rods, leaking paint cans, rotten drywall soaked in chemicals, and the worst part, it was all dumped right in front of his garage, completely blocking access. Art stared at the mess, his jaw clenched. "Good morning to you too, Karen," he muttered. 3 hours later, he hired a professional hazardous waste service, the $450 gone, right when his income from electrical contracting was drying up, thanks to Karen's campaign against him in the HOA group chat. Night 2. One of Art's hidden cameras, mounted in a tree, with night vision, caught movement. A figure in a black hoodie approached his truck, crouched low. A blade flashed under the infrared. 2 tires were slashed, and on the garage door, in red spray paint nearly 3 feet tall, MOVO RELS. At 6 a.m., Art reviewed the footage in silence. Then calmly called the tire shop, printed out the intruder's image in full size. He submitted it along with a police report, but just as Chief Martinez had warned him, night footage wasn't clear enough to press charges. Night 3, and this time, Karen didn't send someone else. She came herself. Around 1:40 a.m., Art lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling. A primal feeling in his chest told him something terrible was coming. And then, the high-pitched scream of a chainsaw tore through the night. Art sprang from bed, raced out the back door like a tiger cornered. But it was already too late. Before him lay the shattered stump of a tree. The oak tree, 30 years old, planted by his father to honor the memory of his mother. It had stood tall through storms, droughts, and decades of sunsets. Now it lay in pieces. Cut clean across the trunk, the rope swing still dangled, gently swaying in the wind. Art froze. His chest tightened, his breath caught, his hands shook, not from fear but from pain. Not physical pain, but something deeper. As if a part of his soul had just been carved out and thrown to the ground. That tree wasn't just wood and leaves. It was memory. It was the shade where he once listened to his father's stories. The place he cried after his mother passed. It was sacred. And now it was gone because of one woman's obsession with power. Art sank to his knees. And for the first time since this battle began he wept. Not out of defeat, but from grief. But even through the tears, something inside him stirred. This was the end of restraint, the end of patience. If Karen had the nerve to cut down his memories, then he would cut off the one thing she loved most. The lifeblood of her $4 million mansion. Her power. The next morning, Art opened his late father's old wooden chest, documents, receipts, permits, contracts, and then, as if fate had placed it there, he found it, a thick file labeled, Electric Utility Agreement Hartwell 2014. Art flipped through the pages, carefully quickly, until he stopped at page 3, a single line, tiny, barely noticeable. Any verified act of harassment or interference against the landowner or immediate family shall result in the immediate termination of electrical service under this agreement. Art closed his eyes. Then chuckled. His father had planted a legal landmine. A quiet bomb set in ink, waiting for the right trigger. Karen had just cut down the tree his mother loved, and Art, he was about to cut the lights on everything she held dear. 6:30 a.m. Art sat quietly in front of his computer. On the screen was a scanned copy of the power easement contract, complete with signatures, official stamps, and most importantly the clause that could cancel the entire agreement, with just one question: was there harassment? And the answer, painfully clear. He had everything. The video of Karen lying to the police, the bogus HOA violation letters, the footage of property vandalism emails from the HOA falsely accusing him, and an audio recording of Karen at the fence saying, "I'm going to destroy your life in this neighborhood." In each item was a brick. Together, they built a wall of evidence, solid, undeniable. By 10:00 a.m., Art was on the phone with Jake Morrison, his college friend, now a real estate attorney in Austin. It took Jake less than 10 minutes to respond. "Art, this clause is enforceable. If the harassment is documented, which it is, then the power easement across your land becomes void. That means Karen legally loses access to electricity." Art didn't smile. But in his eyes something lit up, not revenge, but the quiet satisfaction of finally defending himself, in the very language that had been used to beat him down the law. That afternoon, Art walked into the county courthouse in person, file in hand. He submitted a formal petition to terminate the power easement, citing violation of the harassment clause. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with a calm voice, flipped through the documents, then looked up. "If the court finds the evidence of harassment credible, this order will be approved, and the electricity will be shut off immediately. Are you certain you want to proceed?" Art nodded, without hesitation. "Karen cut down the tree my mother planted. She chose violence instead of an apology. I choose justice." While Art prepared quietly, Karen began to unravel. Later that day, news of Art's visit to the courthouse spread quickly, thanks to the courthouse employee who, by chance, happened to be the niece of an HOA board member. By evening, Karen was in a panic. She called her attorney. She called the HOA board. She even tried reaching the mayor. But the only thing her lawyer could offer was brutal honesty. "If the contract includes that clause, and the evidence is strong enough, there's nothing we can do. No injunction. No emergency appeal. If the power goes out, it will be legally justified." For the first time in years, Karen's face turned pale. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood like a queen, now realized her throne was cracking. 6:00 p.m. Art received a text message from the court: "Petition approved. Judge signed. Order goes into effect at 7:00 am tomorrow." Just one sentence. But it was the death knell for Karen's illusion of control. Art didn't rush to call the utility company. Instead, he called Sheriff Martinez. "Sheriff, I'm cutting the power to Karen's house tomorrow. Legally, I want you there. Not for protection but for confirmation that this justice is clean, clear, and fully lawful." Martinez's response was short: "I'll be there at 64:05, and Art, your father, would be proud." That night, Art brewed himself a fresh cup of coffee and sat quietly on his porch. Across the street, Karen's mansion glowed brightly in the dark. Her pool lights shimmered like something out of a Hollywood movie. Her landscape spotlights beamed into the night like theater floodlights. But in just a few hours, every light would flicker out, every A to C unit would go silent, and every lie would be buried in darkness. When a man holds justice in his hands, and the power to choose, he can either forgive or deliver the accountability an entire neighborhood has longed for. And in this part, Art didn't just flip a switch, he toppled an entire arrogant, authoritarian HOA empire, all with a single click. 6:30 a.m. Sunday morning. Art stood on his porch, sleeves rolled, holding a steaming cup of coffee in his father's old ceramic mug. In the driveway, the utility company truck had already arrived. Two technicians, Mike and Carlos, stepped out, cheerful and calm. "Easiest job all month," Mike grinned, glancing at the grid diagram. Sheriff Martinez pulled in next. He didn't say much, just nodded at Art, then took his place beside the small power station between the two properties, a silent pillar of justice. 6:45 a.m. Karen appears. Gone was her usual elegance. Karen stormed out of her mansion in a wrinkled bathrobe, hair a tangled mess, face bare and pale. She screamed the moment she saw the technicians working on the box. "You can't touch that! I'm the HOA president!" "This is illegal." Art stepped forward holding a folder of documents. He calmly unfolded the court order, complete with the judge's signature and seal. "Karen, as of 700 a.m. today, your right to access power through my property has been legally revoked. This isn't revenge, it's a consequence. I gave you chances to apologize, to fix this. You chose arrogance instead." Karen froze. Her eyes darted, panic rising. She dialed her husband. Voicemail. Her lawyer, no answer. The city official, again, voicemail. The entire web of influence she once ruled with vanished the moment she needed it. 6:59 a.m., the neighborhood gathers. 12 neighbors had assembled on Art's lawn. Some held their phones to record the moment. Others sipped coffee with wide grins. Linda, the quiet hero who had filmed Karen's lies, sat on a folding chair, nibbling a donut. 3 years she fined me over a garden shed, Bob muttered. I lived to see this day. 700 a.m. Click. Art stepped toward the power station. Mike gave a final nod. Sheriff Martinez turned solemn. Art, this is your last chance. Once we flip it, her power will be cut for at least 10 weeks. Reconnection will cost her tens of thousands. Are you sure? Art didn't blink. I'm sure. This isn't retaliation. This is justice. He placed his hand on the breaker. One heartbeat. One breath. Seiki. Karen's entire mansion went black. From the chandelier in her marble foyer, to the pool filtration, to the security cameras. Everything shut down like a movie scene cut off mid-climax. Silence for 2 seconds. Then, cheers erupted. Someone shouted, "First time in 5 years her house hasn't looked like an airport runway." Carlos whistled. Mike gave Art a high five. Linda stood, lifting her coffee, to those who can read the law. And Karen. She collapsed onto her marble steps, covering her face, tears pouring down. No longer a Karen. Just a woman who had lost everything: her control, her image, her glow. 7:30 a.m. Symbol of collapse. A light breeze swept through the yard, peeling off one last HOA violation notice from Art's front door. It fluttered across the grass and landed face down. Art looked toward the 8,000 square foot mansion, now draped in darkness. No more shouting, no more threats, only a silence, thick and heavy, with justice in the air. True power doesn't lie in who can shout the loudest. It lies in who's willing to take responsibility for their actions. And when Karen lost the light, she began to lose everything she once believed was untouchable: her wealth, her status, and the trust of an entire community. Week 1. From panic to dismay, Karen rushed to rent a portable generator, one of those used for outdoor weddings, costing $200 per week, not including fuel. But it could only handle a few light bulbs and the fridge. Air conditioning? No. The pool? Nope. Spotty at best. Meanwhile, the Texas heat climbed to 98 degrees F, 37 degrees C. That first night without AC, Karen had to sleep in the car. On the second night, she and her husband checked into a downtown hotel, $300 a night. Gary, once the quiet, agreeable husband, started sighing more and talking less. But this was only the beginning. Week 2. The price of control A for sale sign appeared in front of Karen's mansion. Initial asking price $4.25 million. No inquiries. 1 week later, it dropped to $3.9 million. Still, the realtor sighed. Everyone asks, why is there no power? Why can't it be reconnected? Of course, the real reason wasn't on the info sheet. Neighbor legally cut it off due to violation of contract and 3 years of harassing the community. A week 3. The fall of an empire. Gary filed for legal separation. In the court documents, he wrote extreme need for control, abuse of authority causing significant financial harm, and a complete breakdown of shared life values. Karen couldn't believe it. The mansion, once meant to be the heart of the community, was now the open wound of a dictatorship fallen by its own weight. Emergency HOA meeting Friday night. 32 of 47 homeowners gathered at the community center. Single agenda: remove Karen from the HOA board. Motion proposed by Bob Martinez, the handyman Karen fined once for leaving a paint can in his driveway for 24 hours. Seconded by Linda, the sweet grandmother who was forced to remove her chili plants because they were aesthetic violations. The vote, silent, swift, and unanimous. Karen was removed. All the privileges revoked. The new show president Linda. In her first speech, she said, "We don't need an HA to punish us. We need one to connect us. To help, not to threaten." Applause filled the room. Art, a new kind of leader. A week later, Art's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Homeowners from other counties reached out, asking, "Did you really cut HOA power? Can you help me read my land use agreements?" He didn't go on TV. Didn't make a YouTube channel. But Art became a living symbol of one truth: when you understand the law, you can defend yourself. No need to shout louder than anyone else. 7:00 p.m. 1 month later, Art sat on his porch, beer in hand, his loyal dog Moose at his feet. The soft glow from his modest house lit up the night like peace itself. And Karen's mansion next door, dark. The generator ran out of fuel. The pool covered with a tarp. The lawn overgrown. No longer Karen's house, Just a decaying monument to power misused. What about Karen? She no longer ran HOA meetings. No more friends dropping by. No more control over anyone. And perhaps, for the first time, Karen began to understand. You can't control a community by fear forever. A gentle ending 30 days later, one quiet Sunday evening, exactly 30 days after the power shut off, rain began to fall softly over Art's roof. The droplets tapped rhythmically on the tin like a lullaby. Inside, warm light glowed from his kitchen window. Moose snoozed peacefully at Art's feet. He sat quietly, hands wrapped around a warm mug of coffee, staring at the wet patch of earth where the great oak once stood. Now, only a stump remained. But instead of sorrow, Art smiled. Because next to that stump, a new sapling had been planted. A young oak, identical to the one from years ago, sourced from a rare nursery after weeks of searching. And this time, he hadn't planted it alone. Linda, the new HOA president, and a few neighbors had helped him. And Karen. She had left the neighborhood. The massive mansion stood empty. The for sale sign bent in the wind. No buyers. No inquiries. No one mentioned her name, but everyone remembered what had happened. Like a quiet but undeniable warning, power must never outrank morality. And arrogance always has a price. Art didn't seek revenge. He simply showed the neighborhood another way to live, calm, principled, uncompromising in the face of wrongdoing. His strength didn't lie in fists, but in documents, evidence, and the memories of a just father who raised him to be the man he is. The porch light flicked on. An old jazz record began to play through the speaker. Art lifted his cup slightly and whispered, "Welcome home, Dad. Surely, like me, you've had moments when you felt powerless in the face of injustice. When it seemed like those with money or status stood above the law. But Art's story reminds us you don't need to shout. You don't need to throw punches. You just need patience, a solid understanding of the law, and the courage to act at the right time, in the right way." If this story touched you, made you laugh, got you angry, or even brought a tear to your eye, please don't leave in silence. Like this video if you believe that justice still lives in the hands of everyday people. Leave a comment below. Have you ever met a Karen in real life? What would you have done if you were in Art's place? I read every single reply. Share this story with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes, one simple switch is all it takes to change everything. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story. Real, life stories that go deeper than headlines and touch the heart. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I'll see you in the next video, where justice isn't just an idea, but something we can still believe in.